more on that. Turning to a story that we've been telling you about this morning, the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund running out of money. Today, hundreds of first responders, survivors, and families will be marching in Washington. They're pushing for full compensation for everyone suffering illnesses as a result of exposure to toxins during the weeks of sifting through the rubble at the World Trade Center site. A group of bipartisan lawmakers set to introduce the Never Forget the Heroes bill, calling for a quick yes vote. Jon Stewart's a comedian and former host of The Daily Show on Comedy Central, and John Feal is a 9/11 responder. Both are longtime advocates of 9/11 workers who were sickened while working at the site following the terrorist attack. Jon Stewart and John Feal are our headliners today as they join us from Capitol Hill. Good morning to you both, gentlemen. Thank you for coming on the program this morning. And Jon Stewart, I know that you're joining us to give them an even bigger voice. What's your message this morning?
If we can. Well, you know, as I'm listening to the feed, I see there's a tremendous amount of news happening. There's an awful lot going on, and it's very hectic. And we don't want the 9/11 community and the first responders to have their issue be swept under the rug or be ignored. We're trying to get a quick resolution to get the VCF fund fully funded and then extended as long as the health care. These are men and women who have suffered great illnesses because of their heroic work down on Ground Zero during 9/11 and during the months that passed, and they deserve our attention. They've always answered the call for us, and we need to answer the call for them. So we're just trying to get that pushed through.
John Feal, I've heard you speak on this. You're extremely passionate about helping those that continue to live impacted by the toxins of those days following 9/11. Firefighters, police, men and women. How will this bill help them?
Well, one, thank you for having me. And yeah, I'm passionate because people are sick and dying. I've been to 181 funerals. The pain, the struggle, the fight is real. When this went into effect, the conversations are now, do I put gas in the car or do I put food on the table? Do I keep a roof over my head or do I pay the utilities? This is real, and this policy effect is devastating to the 9/11 community. And this is a bipartisan bill led by Senator Gillabrand and Cory Gardner from Colorado, and Congress has to sense our urgency. It's that simple. You know, Congress has a chance right now, and I think Congress and the Senate need this more than anything to come together like we did 18 years ago. They can take our worst day, our worst weeks, and our worst months, and especially our worst 18 years since, and come together and make Congress's finest hour. They have a chance to be that guy. And anybody who practices political malpractice, we're going to expose them.
Jon Stewart, I know you published an opinion piece this morning talking about the need for funding this bill, what 9/11 heroes need from Congress. In that piece, you talked about walking the halls of Congress with the injured and ill 9/11 responders and survivors. And you said in that piece that you were looking to see if remembering 9/11 is more than a cheap obligatory slogan senators and representatives tweet out. What did you find?
You know, I think there's an inevitability to this process. We, unfortunately, you know, John's been through this for over 18 years. After 9/11, 9/11 responders had to fight to get people to believe that they were actually sick. Then they had to fight to get people to believe that it was actually caused by Ground Zero and the toxins there, which, by the way, the only thing that's even remotely analogous to what they faced at Ground Zero are the burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we know that these things cause the types of illnesses that the 9/11 responders and survivors have been getting. So they had to fight for that. Then they had to fight their own government to try and get some kind of health program that could help them kind of navigate their way through all this. So this has been a fight. It's not something that they're unaccustomed to, but it's something that I find just, it's unconscionable. It cannot continue. We cannot force the men and women that so heroically went down to Ground Zero and stayed there for 9-10 months, disrupting their lives as well. We can't force them to have to fight for this anymore. We have to grant them, look, I know Congress is a bastion of fiscal responsibility, as you can tell from the marble and gold rotunda that we're standing in. They've got to understand, in the larger scheme of things, this is not a lot of money. But what it will do for these families is enormous. This is a national embarrassment and crisis.
John,
and they've got to step up.
If I could ask John Feal, why has it been such a fight? I mean, this is a bipartisan effort. What we're seeing introduced today: Senator Kirsten Gillabrand, Chuck Schumer, Cory Gardner, Carolyn Maloney, Jerry Nadler, Pete King. There are Democrats and Republicans involved here. So why has it been such a fight to make this funding permanent?
Well, one, out of sight, out of mind. We're 18 years later. Many people have moved on since 9/11, but for those affected by 9/11, this is the longest day that hasn't ended for us. But as for elected officials, I can't speak for all of them. Usually it's because of tribal loyaltism or bad politics and poor leadership. But I think by the time we get done over the next few months, that we'll have a bill ready to vote on, that Republican leadership will agree with Senator Gillabrand, and hopefully that they make this permanent. We compare our bill to the nuclear bill and the black lung bill that are permanent, and geographically they help people in different parts of the country. But the James Droga Health and Compensation Act, we're asking for permanent status on the VCF, just like on the health care. That's national. We dwarf them in size. 434 out of 435 congressional districts were represented at Ground Zero, and about 90,000 people are in the World Trade Center Health Program. Another 20,000 are waiting to be compensated for their illnesses and injuries. So Congress, again, needs to sense our urgency, and they have a chance to do the right thing. It's that simple.
And the program exists. It's not like this has to be built up from scratch and they've got to work through all the bugs of it. The program exists. It's been functioning beautifully. The Justice Department and the Special Paymaster have really done a great job of streamlining the bureaucracy and going through these claims and credentialing them in a really, really good manner. All they've got to do is refill the card. Just refill the debit card so that these families aren't going to see their awards cut by up to 70%.
I think Congress can no longer put an arbitrary date or a date on legislation anymore. These cancers and these respiratory illnesses, they have no dates. Everybody's immune system's different, and the latency period is different for these illnesses. Stop giving us 5 years here, giving us 5 years there. We're asking for 72 years to coincide with the World Trade Center Health Program. That's what we got in 2015 when we got 75 years. Now we have 72. So we want 72 years on the VCF. It's that simple. Anything short of that is a failure.
Jon Stewart, how did you get involved?
I lived in Lower Manhattan, so I was sort of involved from the get-go. But in 2010, we had heard that there was this health bill, James Droga health bill, and I knew James's story of how he had gotten sick and passed away, and they had found glass and mercury in his lungs, which was part of the atomized. This was the Twin Towers were atomized and turned into particles, and there were fires down there. And those guys worked down there, ate down there, breathed everything in. So it was clear that they were going to face some challenges and some sicknesses, but for some reason we couldn't move the government. So I found that in 2010, when they were first putting the bill on there, they weren't going to do it, and I contacted John Feal, and once you contact John Feal, you become an admirer of his for life and an obedient servant. And so through his leadership, I was able to get involved in a small way and turn a spotlight on things that in some ways were being swept under the rug. And we've stayed close since. And I honestly can't believe that we're still in this position. A lot of the men and women that we brought down here early on and that John has been with, they're no longer with us. Yeah. And those are names that go up on John's Memorial Park out in Wisconsin. But it's a tragic situation.
John's being humble, but John has a role to play, and he's got a very large audience. But so does Fox News, yes. And I'm imploring Fox News to continue telling this story and continue to tell people across the country of the 9/11 responders in every state and almost every congressional district that need this help.
It really helps. It actually really does make a difference.
We absolutely hear you, and we love and support our nation's heroes. You're out there fighting for them. We appreciate you and what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having me.
Jon Stewart and John Feal, appreciate your time this morning. New York Senator Kirsten Gillabrand is set to introduce the Never Forget the Heroes bill later today. She's also formed a 2020 exploratory committee, though she has not yet formally launched a presidential campaign. Senator Gillabrand will be speaking with our very own Chris Wallace tonight on Special Report. That's tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time.